TUSC, the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition, Tony Mulhearn.
Thanks, Roger. Well, during this campaign, one is tempted just to sit back and witness the Tory grandees scrambling around, attempting to knife each other in the throat. But make no mistake about it, these two groups are the same side of the single coin. Inside the EU, they have spent the last few years implementing policies that have seen a massive transfer of wealth from the pockets of working people into the wallets of their already rich friends. I recall very clearly in 1975 in the campaign against the common market, Eric Heffer and Tony Benn said that the common market is a club for the fat cats. Never a truer word has been spoken. And I don't make the slightest concession to the demagogues and the racists in the Brexit camp. I say a plague on both their houses. TUSC stands for a very clear, distinct alternative to Europe.
But Tony, I'm sure
we're in favour.
You're but I'm sure you'll be able to tell us more about that future for TUSC in a moment. Playing with us when it comes to EU facts and figures. Now, go on, Tony, because you wanted to respond to the earlier question, didn't you? So, Tony Mulhearn.
Oh, sorry. I think that's a very pertinent question. Obviously, in any arguments, opposing forces will stack up the facts to support their own position. That's understood. But the arguments that are being made now are so outlandish. The likes of Cameron, Osborne saying the economy is growing when patently it ain't. On the last point, I've got to say this about Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy has spent his life opposing the European Union, making very eloquent speeches about it's a rich man's club, it's a bureaucracy which is imposing laws on Britain which are not in the interest of the mass of the population. And then he suddenly does a flip. And as the question implied, he is in fact a prisoner of the right wing inside the PLP. Leading to this decision, McFadden, who was the shadow spokesman on Europe, said to Corbyn, unless you support the Remain position, I will resign from the shadow cabinet. And I think Jeremy should have told her where to go. Unfortunately, Jeremy buckled, and he is now opposing a position he's adopted for the last 30 or 40 years. It's unfortunate, but I still think we need to support him and get him back on track to oppose what is, in fact, a rich man's club.
Okay, that's Tony Mulhearn from TUSC. And now Sim Gwyle.
Yes, as the only
question raised by John, was it?
Yeah,
Terry, yes. Definitely, there is an alternative to both camps, who are in fact currently at each other's throats. And that, of course, is TUSC, the Socialist Party, which is advancing the notion of withdrawing from the rich man's club, but campaigning for a socialist united a federation of socialist states in Europe. That's not too, that doesn't take too much of a stretch of an imagination. If you look at the struggles taking place in France, in Portugal, in France particularly at the present time, where workers are battling against a so-called Labour government, a so-called socialist government, which is in fact carrying through Thatcherite policies. But on this point about reforming, is staying in and reforming it. No, and that's the position of Jeremy Corbyn and some of the trade unionists. There are 3 trade unions that are actually campaigning for withdrawal, supporting the position I'm advancing at the present time. But nobody has explained to me how you're going to reform this monstrous bureaucracy that has taken place, that is Europe. Nobody explains how that's going to happen. There's no direct elections. There's no democratic processes which allow you to influence and to reform Europe. It's this huge bureaucratic instrument which is used to impose the policies of capitalist governments throughout Europe.
Okay,
I'll give you an example. One final point I'll give you now. What is tunneling through Europe at the present time, which if we stay in will be completed, is the Posted Workers Directive. Very simply this means, if a Polish plumber is on £2 in Europe and he comes to Britain, as it stands, he has got to be paid the rate for the job or at least the national minimum wage. The Postal Workers Directive will direct that that Polish plumber will receive the wages he receives in Poland, £2.50 an hour. And if a trade union takes action in protest against that, they will be in violation of the law.
Okay,
that's what is in store for us if we remain in Europe.
Okay, Tony, there's something you said that some disagree with,
on the question of immigration, which is being used by those who want us to vote out in a big way, and we know that Farage is involved in it, so we know that racism would be there somewhere. Now, I think that's my opinion. I think the guy is a scaremonger about immigration. I think we should have an adult debate about immigration. I personally haven't got a single racist bone in my body, and I also come as an immigrant. I was born in Ireland, so I'm not going to be a racist person. I'm not going to be anti-immigration for the point. But I'll tell you this: where I come from also is the fact that I don't believe we should not have any control of immigration in this country, wherever it's coming from, whether it's coming from Asia or whether it's coming from Europe or anywhere else. I do think it's an issue, adult to adult, we should debate, and I think we should be able to control our immigration into this country.
Okay.
That's not from a racist point of view, that's a practical point of view.
Tony Mulhearn is desperate, I know, to speak.
Yeah. Well,
No,
well, I mean, this question of racism, it skewed the whole debate on the question of in or out. And my position is absolutely clear. I hold no truck with the racists on the exit side of the argument. The likes of Farage to say he's not a racist is not to recognise the reality of the situation. Both camps on the right are in fact used playing the racist card in the most unscrupulous fashion possible. I'm from Irish descent, like Conor there. My mother come from Enniscorthy. My grandfather come from Belfast. At the turn of the last century, 1/3 of the population in this city came directly from Ireland. 1/3. The exactly arguments we used the same as then. They're driving down wages. They're undercutting the wages of the indigenous population. There were signs around the city in boarding houses and hotels. No Irish and no dogs. We fought through that. There was sectarian bitterness and conflict was overcome in the end by the organised labour movement. When working class people recognised we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves, we should be fighting to improve and defend our positions in terms of jobs and wages, and there's a coming together. And in fact, you do not find any conflict now amongst on either religious grounds or people from Irish descent. And I think that's a proud tradition which we should maintain.
All right,
nobody is advocating open borders. That would be ridiculous. But the question is, immigration should be treated in a humane way, because to observe those people streaming away from the war zones, which were created as a result of Blair's intervention in Iraq, they're the product of that conflict, and we have a moral and political responsibility to succour those people, to look after them, and to accommodate them. And they're not responsible, by the way, they're not responsible for the decline of social services. It's the cuts by this Tory government over the last 10 years that's produced the shortages
Tony,
in our
thank
social
you.
services.
That's the campaign you fought on with TUSC. And the gentleman over on the other side.
The question of TTIP, that's the most pernicious element of the whole European project. Richard Kemp talks about how eager Barack Obama is for us to continue membership. He sees Europe as an instrument of American foreign policy. The biggest driving force behind TTIP is America. And TTIP will in fact prevent, by law, any national country from nationalising the means of production, from taking back into public ownership the NHS, from taking back into public ownership the railway industry, because TTIP has the power to take any nation state to court and fine it if it interferes with international profitability. And let me make this point as well. And the question of business is being hammered by the Remainers. It's an absolute fantasy to suggest that British capitalism, British business, would discontinue trading with Europe to the same level as they are now. Every single businessman, every single capitalist wants to maximise his profit. And he's not particularly concerned about this bureaucratic monstrosity which exists in Europe. He wants to sell his goods. The Germans and the Spanish and the French want to sell their goods to us. That will continue.
All right,
so to imagine that the whole, you know, the business structure in Britain would be severely undermined is an absolute fiction. Finish on this point. And I think the value of this referendum is hopefully Cameron and company and those surrounding him will be defeated. Cameron will be destroyed as a Prime Minister. He'll be compelled to go to the country, and we'll have an opportunity of getting rid of this Tory government forever and retaining a Corbyn-led Labour government to carry out socialist policies.
Okay, thank you for that, Tony.